Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? So I just wanted to go ahead and kind of add to the tree of knowledge today, which is basically I want to go ahead and kind of teach you guys a thing or two about basically being able to rally trap. And the kind of the questions that I've been hearing about coming from others today and the past couple of days, which is basically what kind of gear do you need to have to be a rally trap? Alright, I'm going to tell you right up front, this is the gear that I want to use when I rally trap. Obviously, if you have champion gear, that's god tier, okay? It's the best gear you can get in the game. Now, here's the reason why I chose the gear that I did. And part of the reason why is because most of this is just what I had, okay? When I started, I was an inf cav, and I slowly worked my way into an inf range, and then conveniently also had it happen to have a pair of mitts, okay? Now, I know some of you guys have been asking me about, you know, why the mitts over the codex, and the only reason I can tell you is in my situation, when you get a big enough composition and you build up enough troops, it's not really going to matter if you've got more than 400%. When you're at about 400% attack or higher, yeah, you can buff it if you want, but really at that point, if you're trying to reduce the amount of wounds that you take, you're trying to increase that HP and defense at that point. Now, in case you're wondering, you know, had I been in war gear, okay, these are the kind of stats that I would have been pulling. I was putting 440, 391, 399, and then to add on to that, I would have even, I could have popped a 70% army attack boost. I had an altar boost on at the time, and I could have also got a leader boost there. That's 30% for the leader, 38% for the altar, so that's 68%, and then another 70%. All right, now take that number of army attack, right, and then add that to the existing 400% I have already on the 3 unit stats that I have. That is how much attack I'd have. So I'm not worried about losing any attack here. It's not a big issue. All right, it's HP that's gonna be a big deal. All right, now for me, I focused as much as I could into the HP portion of this because at this point, that's really all that's necessary. So in case any of you are wondering, right, what gear do you need? And this, I think, applies to trap accounts, but it applies just in general, all right? The idea is to basically increase as many attack stats as possible while simultaneously increasing the HP stats. Now, I think, at least in my opinion, all right, and I know some people are going to argue with me on this, but what I'm going to say is kind of the philosophy that I think seems to work is pick one front line, okay? Pick whatever front line you're going to work in the most often point. You know, so if it's range phalanx, then make range attack higher than the other two stats. So if you've got 400%, your goal is to find that even number across. I think you could just as easily manage that with a lot of the gear that we have in the game. So, I mean, to give you kind of an idea of different kinds of builds you could build, all right? One of them would be the Beast Helm for the helmet, or I think you could just as easily had gone a Bumble Helm, all right? Now, either piece is going to do exactly the same for the helmet. Now, for the actual main hand, right? Because, again, I'm just gonna go through this in stages. So, of course, you know, you can go with a Beast Helm or you can go with a Bumble Helm. Either one is going to work. And the reason why is because these are the 2-type base helmets, okay? And why I'm focusing on 2-type helmets is basically you're trying to increase the attack stat as much as possible, right? So being able to jack that up is going to be as most effective as possible. But since you're doing it mixed, right? Because in a trap scenario, you need to be able to swap to whatever phalanx you need to swap to at a moment's notice. Or basically have as much attack stat as possible across all 3. So that way, if you're at least doing 400% across, it won't really matter, right? If you decide that you want to go infantry, range, it won't matter. Because it's going to be the same any way you go about it, all right? But ultimately, obviously, from an efficiency point perspective, if you've only got one rally on you, obviously, if somebody's sending range at you, okay, it makes more sense to wear all infantry gear and jack up infantry stats as much as possible, and all the infantry attack, and all the infantry HP, and all the infantry defense. That's really all that matters, okay, in that situation, assuming that they're sending range at you, okay? And I'm not saying, oh, they're sending range phalanx. No, I'm saying if they are sending range units. Okay, because if they send cap phalanx at you, but it's all range, it don't matter how many times you try to switch the situation, as long as the composition is what it is. If you don't get that right the first time, then it will not make a difference, because ultimately the phalanx is not as important as what's actually in the composition. All right, but needless to say, right, that's just the helmet. Okay, now if we're talking like the actual main hand, all right, I think a lot of free-to-play / medium pay-to-play will find a great sword to be the answer. But if we're talking what is best, I think the Skull Crusher is arguably the best, because you're getting 20% army attack, which is 60%, which right off the bat a Frostman Greatsword does not even come close to when it's at gold. A gold Crusher will win almost every time, okay? But again, it depends on what you're after. If you're willing to get the kind of rares necessary, mind you, it takes 9 of them for a Skull Crusher, and it takes roughly, okay, about 4. Obviously, there's a big difference there in the rares, so that kind of gives you a different price point and a different kind of, there's a huge difference, okay? But look, the point is, right, is that you got to have gold army attack jewels. That's a given for when you do rally trapping. If you don't have those gold jewels, it's got to be a real pain. Okay, and that's, I mean, mind you though, when I did get zeroed out, you do already know what it looks like without war gear, because I ate those all without any war gear whatsoever. I wasn't familiar gear, FYI. But I'm just saying. Anyway, needless to say though, right? Okay, when it comes to the offhand, obviously some people have asked me about the mitts between the codex, and the only thing I can tell you is that basically between the mitts and the codex, all right, mitts is for HP defense. And yes, if you really want cav and range in your build for some reason, if you're lacking the cav and range and you're trying to get 400%, then yeah, put a codex in. If you're lacking in that department, that's how you'll fix it. But obviously, yeah, you probably should put on a pair of mitts, in my opinion. All right, now when it comes to your actual accessories, all right, there's a number of ways you can go about this. I think you could just as easily manage with, 2 fear drums and a pair of golden, or maybe even, like in the case of my situation, right, I had a pair of ambrosial cups. All right, so ambrosial cups give infantry and range, which is an enormous amount. All right, that's like, it's a good chunk, okay, and attack stats. Then I'm getting into 2 unit stats. Obviously, if you had, a set of champion pieces, obviously it's always king, but it's just for this situation I went with the fear drum, because the fear drum is obviously going to give you a good chunk of cavalry, so there's no reason to ignore it. Okay, now for the leggings, all right, the dragon stallion is, again, infantry and range is kind of a theme here, and you can kind of see why. Now I could have easily picked on a pair of storm tassets, which gives me more HP down the road if they were maxed out, but the thing is obviously I have to work off of what I have. Okay, if I want to just purely increase cavalry, then I could wear a pair of gargantuan belt. And if I was wanting, a better stats, obviously down the road, I might want to swap to a pair of greaves when I get these up to like purple, or maybe even closer to that, because at that point, then it may be worth it. But the point is that I'm basically picking the pieces of gear that increases 2 unit stats and trying to jack that up as high as I possibly can. All right, now down the road, I think, any variation could be made between like a hardened carapace, a plate, or the hedonic cuirass, depending on what you're lacking. If you're lacking infantry and range, then put that on. If you need cav and range, whatever the case might be. Because ultimately the idea is to get that attack stat across 400%, and then the rest will just have to carry itself. Obviously, I think a necessary need for any rally trap is obviously, you need to have your research completed. That's just a given. Okay, I think you can certainly get by, if you don't, but it's going to be pretty difficult, obviously. The lower that is, the worse, the higher the chances are that you're going to go up in the reds. Now, in my case, I didn't just stand, by with like 600k infirms. I had 700k. And in case you're wondering how you do that, you need to go in and get Mole Shaman, and you want to get this to complete max. It's a really helpful thing to have, and frankly, if anybody doesn't have it, get it, especially if you want to be a rally trap down the road. Okay, but that's kind of the build. All right, obviously when you get done building your troops, mind you, this is what you do when you want to build troops. You make all manners and you start printing troops. That's what you do. But when you go in defense mode, you start making these all into infirms. All right, but like when you get it up to that point, right, and you got everything set up at that point, you're really, the only thing you can do at this point is pick out your leaders. Obviously, for technical challenges, I don't want to wear a goblin. If it was my choice, I'd have a berserker, because really the idea is to try and increase all of your stats all the same time and bring them up as most as you can, because really the HP and attack is really what you want out of this. But you know, obviously if you're getting hit in range and you're only getting hit with one rally, then obviously pick the heroes that are going to counter the rally. You know, so if you've got infantry heroes at gold that do 30% infantry attack, obviously that has more, you know, and that's, I mean, that's the point and the whole build of actually doing this. But needless to say, if you guys are having any difficulties with this at all, feel free to say so in the comment section below. Tell me what you need to know, because I'm more than happy to go through and answer your questions, guys. I'm more than happy. But needless to say, that's pretty much it as far as like the gear that you need, and basically give you a kind of a mindset of like how this all works. And needless to say, I'll see you guys next time.